So we're going to walk through how you take the bumper off a Land Cruiser 100 or LX 470. To start with, there's 6 bolts across the bottom here that tag onto this metal bumper with the bumper cover attached into the bumper itself. Those are 10mm socket head bolts. So you just get a socket and you pull those out. There are 2 of them that are 8mm that are up here at your fender. Kind of a booger to get to. So one over here and one right here. And there's some plastic pipe rivets inside of here that you got to pull out. On the Land Cruiser, you might have to pull your grill off to get it out. On the Lexus, you can usually just grab them because the grill goes up with the hood. So we're going to start with the 8mm on the edges here. While you're under here, make sure you unplug your fog lights. If you have a tool like this one, it'll help scoop these plastic pop rivets off by grabbing the head like that and pulling up. Now this bumper has been off a few times, so it's pretty easy to get on and off. Yours may be a little tougher if it's the first time. For that, you can start grabbing it. It's clipped on pretty tight right here. Again, this one's been on and off before. It's off like that. Okay, the next step is to get the actual bumper off itself, not just the bumper cover. This will have to be removed to fit the new winch mount on. There are 4 bolts, 2 here and 2 here that need to come off to do that. I'm going to have a magnet handy for pulling those bolts out. After that, the bumper simply lifts off of it like that. Now you're clear to get your winch plate on. The next step is putting the winch plate on itself down here. It's a 1-piece winch plate. You have to remove your tow hooks and tow loops from the bottom of the frame, so you just have a flat surface on the frame. Then the winch mount plate itself sits over top the frame rails. Just like that. Now you can take your factory bolts that used to go here and bolt them in place. They're not meant for any kind of structure. They're just meant to hold this in place while you drill your holes. You can put your factory bolts back in here. That just holds it in place. This is a 14mm socket. We got it on a wobble with a 6-inch extension for an impact, but you can use a wrench if you need to, or a ratchet. This is a 1/2-inch drill bit. It is not included. The factory frame has holes in it. So this will line up with these holes, and you just drill through to the other side to put your bolts in. All right, our next step is to put the winch mount plate bolts in the back to go across this cross member. That really helps to tie it together for strength. These are all 1/2-inch bolts using a 3/4 socket. Put them in. These all come with the kit. Three-quarter socket. Next step is to put on these angled brackets. They go between the winch mount itself and the frame to tie it all together. And later on, we'll actually tie it to the bumper itself. If we're just putting the winch mount on, note the orientation. We give you generous slots in case your vehicle or your mount configuration is a little bit different. Makes it easier to start the bolts. These M14 bolts that I'm putting in right now come with the kit. They go right in your old toe loop location. We leave the toe loops off to help with our approach angle. If you wanted to put them back on, that's up to you. Your bolts should be long enough on one side, the other side will still require these longer bolts. This is a 22mm socket to firm this up. So you put the bracket on the driver's side. These are directional. There is a driver and passenger side bracket. You're just putting the winch mount on, you'll run these down. So they will go through here and through here. Now obviously we don't have the factory skid plate on here still, so we can put this on, but it should still mount up. I'm not going to tighten these, I'm actually going to take them off because we will be putting a bumper on, but I just wanted to demonstrate that you could put these bolts through. Now for our winch mount, that ties us to the frame here at the toe loop mounts, here at the cross member, and up on top where the cross bolts will go through next. Up here. We're going to put the cross bolts in from where we drill the holes out at. Put these in from the outside, because if you put a winch on here, which most of you probably will, you won't be able to get the bolt out if the winch is in the way later. These are 1/2 inch bolts, 3/4 inch drive. Now if you run into a situation where your bolts are not starting like you expected, you've already tightened them down like I have, you can loosen the other bolts up and you might be able to fit it on easier then. There are variations among OEMs with their vehicles or vehicles that have been wrecked. So that might be some of the variation that you find, or just the flex and the movement on the trail. Not bad, but just a little bit. We're working on putting a winch on a winch plate right now. This is an older 12,000 pound winch we already have laying around. The biggest thing you'll notice on this, we're going to try to get the camera angle where you can see it, is up in here there's a bracket right here that you got to cut off. Cut it off with a hacksaw or sawzall, but you got to cut it off in order to fit this winch in here. Not all winches are that way, but this is one that used to mount valence and bumper things that are no longer on the truck. So it's not hurting anything to cut that off. Okay, we're going to put our roller fairlead, in this case this is a synthetic rope one, on the plate which comes with the kit. That just mounts the roller fairlead up, and this will go underneath the winch itself. These have washers that came with them, but because the bolts are so short, I'd rather have at least a nut thickness of thread engagement than have the washer on there. This is not a moving part, so the washer is not essential. Tip your winch up. What you have to do is align the winch at the bottom and install your winch bolts at that. All right, I'm underneath putting the winch mount bolts on. These are the ones for mounting your winch. They're pretty self-explanatory. You just thread them in. Okay, as you're putting your winch on, you probably notice I have my winch cables. You can route them through here. There is a hole between the radiator, the condenser, and where the headlight assembly is that you can pass the wires through. And on the side of the winch plate mount, there's little brackets that are included in the kit. That's so you have a couple of bolts to bolt the bumper back to when you're finished. Okay, so now it's time to put the factory bumper back on. If your cable's spooled out like mine is, make sure you fish it through the hole that you trimmed out in your bumper. This one was trimmed out pretty large. It's up to you how much you trim it. It may be easier to set the bumper up there, mark it with a Sharpie on the back side, and take it off and trim it some. Roto zips, sheet metal tools, even a sawzall can be used for that. Okay, depending on the look you're after, you may want to trim more or trim less out of here. We probably could trim a little more out of this one. The original fairlead that was on this vehicle was a roller fairlead, not a synthetic rope one. After that, you finish up by putting your bumper back on this clip up here. You put your 8mm bolt in over here. There's a hanger on this side underneath your headlight that can go up on. this hanger right here. The one on this vehicle are kind of loose because it's been on and off a lot. The biggest thing is to make sure that the alignment of the slotted nut here is slid onto the body like it should. I like to pass it through the bumper first and then align it. You go on and plug your fog lights back in here. Again, we have the 8mm bolt up at the top there. The mount bracket that mounts your bumper back on has slots in it, and you may have to loosen these bolts or leave them loose while you put the bumper back on to adjust it up or down. There is some variance up or down, even front to back a little bit. But when you get your bolt that uses a 10mm socket back on that, if there's a weld nut on it, you just screw that back up in place, and that holds your bumper on down here. Now this bumper's been hacked on quite a bit from some projects we've done with it, so there's a big slot right here where we used to have a tie down. But at that point, you have a spot to bolt your bumper to. When you're done with that, you can tighten these bolts in place here. And this is either a 3/4 or 19mm. These are SAE bolts, so officially 3/4. There's a slot in the bottom of the plate here where the air conditioner line passes through. You can fit your wrench up in there to tighten the lower one up. And the upper one, you can reach through the grill with the wrench. Like that. And you can tighten it this way. So you can tighten or loosen that way in order to fit your wrench in there and do your adjustments. Now we'll have to put a torque wrench on these to make it officially finished, but that's how you put your bumper back on it at that point.